At the last CinemaCon, as any good fan knows, Marvel released the long-awaited trailer for Avengers Doomsday. And like any good fan, you waited for a leak, a release, a picture, but no. Ouch. Marvel doesn't seem ready to give us that pleasure just yet, at least not at the time I'm recording this footage. It looks like we'll have to wait a bit longer. Many American journalists and YouTubers were present and shared their recollections, though they didn't all agree on the details. And a real game of telephone even took place. However, after a few days and by cross-checking all the feedback, we're starting to get a good idea of what was shown. And even though all of this sounds absolutely incredible, what I've heard made me ask even more questions compared to what I thought I knew about the story the Russos are going to tell. The trailer showed a lot of things and probably misled us quite a bit again. For example, how could Doom both manipulate everyone and fight Thor when Thor seems to be with the Fantastic Four pretty quickly? So, it might be a small detail to you, but to me, it means a lot. Sorry. Because when you add to that the teasers we've had, the different insider reports, and the latest interviews with the Russo brothers, you realize that the movie might be even more exciting than I thought. And you know me, all of that made me want to investigate, theorize, and lose myself in exploration. That's why together, we're entering the spoiler zone, the danger zone. You're with Kevin Buckott, your favorite theorist's favorite theorist. Opening credits. The trailer for the CinemaCon. Before we start exploring, we still need to get back to the main topic, the famous teaser. First, everyone on the internet seems surprised that there haven't been any leaks. Some people even say that Marvel used advanced military technology to spot anyone who had filmed. Well, I wanted to debunk this whole story a bit. Personally, it's been 15 years I've been attending all kinds of press screenings, especially for releases at risk of spoilers and leaks. And what you've heard about the green laser beams, those are just security guards equipped with night vision goggles. They watch the theater and identify people to remove. Filming lights up your head, so it's not surprising. I wanted to mention it quickly since everyone overreacted, even though it's been around for years. For example, personally, at the Infinity War screening, they simply confiscated all electronic devices before we entered the theater. That, plus the famous goggles, and the lasers. Alright, anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about this trailer. I'll give you a quick overview of what the public saw. We'll go into detail analyzing these images in the rest of the video. First, we need to catch up accurately, and we'll mainly use New Rockstar's excellent video. If you've watched it 4 times, feel free to skip to the next chapter. A 1 to 1.5 minute trailer got everyone on board. Packed with action and surprises, it opens in the X-Men mansion. On the ground, there's the plaque that says Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. It also shows the address of the mansion, 1407 Gray Mountain Lane, Westchester County, New York. This is actually the exact address of the Fox X-Men. In a voiceover, we hear what seems to be the voice of Robert Downey Jr., with an accent described as Eastern European. Some even say that it sounds close to a Romanian accent, and that some words are hard to understand. So no, normally this Dr. Doom has absolutely nothing to do with our Tony Stark. But once again, we will come back to all these elements later. We hear him say, something is coming, something we might not be able to stop. Before the end of the day, we will probably have to face an unimaginable decision. This is where the differences begin. We find Professor Xavier in his wheelchair, displaying the new X-Men logo on a red background. He looks out the window, and here the accounts differ. Some say the sky is simply red. Others say that a red planet appears there, or even that the atmosphere is literally on fire. The same goes for Xavier's reaction. Some say that this light just forces him to cover his eyes, while others say he is terrified. Well, let's hope we get to see it with our own eyes soon. Next comes a shot still set in a misty red sky with a weak sun in the background. Dr. Doom gets up from what looks like a superhero landing. As he stands up, we get a first look at his appearance. It's exactly the same as in the promo photo we saw. A long cape, symbol-decorated armor, and a mask different from the post-credits scene in Fantastic Four. The Marvel logo appears on red, then switches to black. In the beginning of this trailer, everything suggests that these moments, near the X-Men mansion, depict an incursion. In Jonathan Hickman's run, which I often talk to you about, Time Runs Out, incursions are very often represented by a red sky with a huge planet in orbit. This is where an interdimensional portal opens, letting you travel between universes, similar to what we saw in Multiverse of Madness, where the incursion had already happened. But also, this is where the possible destruction of these two universes begins, and it seems that this red sky marks the entire trailer. Then we see the new Avengers Tower. It's different from the one we saw in the movie Thunderbolts, since let me remind you, it was still under renovation at that time. before seeing the headquarters completed, in the post-credit scene that takes place 14 months after the movie. On the outside, the legendary A from Stark Tower is replaced by the new Avengers logo. The tower has been redesigned with new extensions, possibly reminding you of the Tree Towers scene from the comics. The iconic circular door with the A opens, revealing the Fantastic Four emerging from their ship, as seen in the post-credits scene, with Thor following closely behind. In the new Avengers HQ, the same one from the post-credit scene, we see several groups at odds still illuminated by a red atmosphere. The new Avengers on the left are made up of John Walker, Red Guardian, Yelena Belova, Ghost, and Bucky. And on the right, we see the former, or real Avengers, Sam, Scott Lang, Thor, and Falcon. In the center, elevated, are the Fantastic Four. Behind them, a very interesting detail, is a diagram taken directly from one of the comic panels from this same run. It's the one where Reed Richards explains to the Illuminati how incursions work. But here, Reed only seems to show 3 planets. His world, the X-Men's world, and the Avengers world, 828, 1005, and 616. Then begins the speech that will set the tone for the end of this trailer. An angry Thor. He says, "I have fought alongside many warriors in my time. They were much stronger than all of us put together. And they died. They died facing enemies and threats that scare me much less than these ones. Everything they sacrificed will have been for nothing if we do not stay united. Put aside your petty quarrels. Take nothing for granted, except this. If you come back, you will come back as brothers and sisters. But mark my words, we are going to need a miracle." During this speech, we see a succession of new scenes. First, scenes taken from the same scene as the last teaser. We see Namor on his throne, the one from Wakanda Forever, only now it's dried up. It is no longer submerged in water. Shuri looks at him, then looks at M'Baku, king of Wakanda, then she puts on her Black Panther armor. The Wakandans then surround Namor in a threatening way under a red sky. Next, there's a shot of Thor landing with Stormbreaker in what appears to be the garden of the X-Mansion. We see that he is near a broken statue, similar to the one seen in the unboxed PhD leaks at the start of filming. Stormbreaker then crackles with lightning and we see Thor charging at Doctor Doom. From there, an explosion destroys the stairs of the mansion. Cyclops activates his visor and fires his laser, followed by a fight where Channing Tatum's Gambit is shot. Shang-Chi goes all out in what looks like a kind of dance that strongly resembles the Tai Chi scenes from his own movie. Both use their powers and trade blows. Shang-Chi throws 2 rings at Gambit's chest, but Gambit pulls out an ace of hearts, charging it with kinetic energy while shaking his head like, "Don't even try, kid." Then we're back in the desert from teaser 4, the one with Black Panther. We see that famous shot of her walking away from the camera, but in front of her, it's no longer a desert. There's a circular wall of water. We're actually in the city of Talokan at the bottom of the ocean, but some force seems to be pushing the sea back, just like Moses did in the Bible. The pyramid is indeed the temple of Talokan. That's why the Talokan people don't seem reassured in the teaser. They're exposed, their city is vulnerable to surface dwellers, and they're looking up at a red sky. We then see the meeting between Ben Grimm, accompanied by Sue, Bucky, Joaquin, and other Avengers, with Shuri and M'Baku. Back in the world of the X-Men, Yelena draws her weapon, and immediately Reed Richards stretches out his arm to hold Sam back. Yelena approaches Mystique, who has an extremely funny style. Similar to the comic version, like the one on the tote bag. She catches the stuff Yelena throws and takes on her appearance. Then 2 Yelenas are shown on the ground strangling each other, followed by rapid shots. Charles Xavier and Magneto in the mansion, just like in their teaser. Scott Lang kissing the forehead of what appears to be his daughter Cassie, which explains why she shared her situation on social media. Johnny Storm hugging his sister Sue. That same Sue Storm nodding in a place surrounded by oceans. And Shuri responding to her with the Wakanda salute just like in the teaser. Focused, managing a force field, maybe to hold back the water, and Namor escaping above the walls of water. The very end of the trailer shows Thor repeating his attack against Thanos. You know, the one where Stormbreaker is unstoppable. He's aiming at Doctor Doom in the gardens of the mansion. But Doom calmly raises 2 fingers and stops Stormbreaker between his index and middle finger with a simple ting. And no, the lightning doesn't hit him. Under the metal mask, we see the furious green eyes of Doctor Doom. Thor then screams in frustration. The trailer ends with Thor in the Fantastic Four's ship, Mjolnir in hand, suggesting that Doom may have destroyed Stormbreaker. He ends his speech with, "We're going to need a miracle." Then we hear a familiar voice behind him say, "Hey pal." Thor then replies, "That's impossible." Mjolnir slips from Thor's hand and flies toward an open hand. Steve Rogers. He's not old like at the end of Endgame and is wearing modern clothes with long hair and a beard. Just like the outfit in those leaked photos. You know, the ones everyone said were fake. I told you they were real. Anyway, the legendary Avengers authentic theme plays with the logo and the release date. Well, now you have the full context. And believe me, there's a lot to talk about here, especially about how the movie is going to unfold and how the teams will interact with each other. Alright, I apologize again to those who saw the new Rockstar video. I literally adapted the video into French since I wasn't there myself to describe what I saw. Now let's move on to my expertise, analysis and theory. Which team for Doomsday? To understand what we've just discussed, we should place ourselves in the MCU world and know each team's location, especially who is where. Let's begin with the latest, the Fantastic Four. According to the latest news, Marvel's favorite family survived an attack from Galactus. The new family member, Franklin, was able to bring his mother back to life even though he was just a baby. A few years later, when Franklin has grown up, Doctor Doom appears in their living room, and Sue seems to know him since she doesn't attack him. Well, I know, I had a theory that this scene would probably take place in another universe, but the new information might make me say otherwise. During the promotional interview for the film, some time ago, Pedro Pascal answered a question about whether the Avengers would gather in the Fantastic Four's living room. She replied to him that it was certainly strange to have all these people here, but the only thing that had really changed was that they had changed the carpet.
Notice how spacious that living room is. It's meant for more than 4 people. Here's a big spoiler. They changed the carpet color. It's nice to have a bit of a home court, not a home court advantage, but just to be on a set. So something does feel different when you look around a room and you're like, oh, you too. Okay, great.
So there's a good chance that this scene actually takes place in the Fantastic Four universe and that it's the starting point of their adventure. On the new Avengers side, formerly Thunderbolt, we found them in a post-credit scene where they are now the official team of the former Stark Tower. We learn that this scene takes place during the events of Doomsday. While Yelena talks about the rivalry with Sam's Avengers, she reveals that a space crisis is happening that no one is telling them about, suggesting that the Avengers might already be heavily involved in it. They might have already been working on it. By the way, with this trailer, we learn a bit more about this famous Avengers team. The end of Captain America, Brave New World shows us that Sam is going to form his own team. A more or less clandestine team, since the one approved by the American government is actually Bucky's team. But who is on it? Well, if we believe the trailer, it would be made up of Sam, Joaquin Torres, Scott Lang, and possibly Thor. But we can also add some members who appeared in the post-credits scene of Shang-Chi. Notably Shang-Chi himself, but also Bruce Banner, who was probably unwell at that time. Maybe Bruce, and definitely Carol Danvers, but we'll come back to that in a moment. The post-credits scene ends with the idea that the Fantastic Four's ship is arriving in the 616's atmosphere from another universe, which brings us to Thor. Since the trailer clearly shows us that he is on that ship, and he's there with Steve Rogers. Of course, all of this could obviously happen much later, but you'll see, I have my own theory about that, and we shouldn't forget the Wakandans and Talokan, who will be important here. According to the latest news, M'Baku is the new king of Wakanda. Shuri will probably serve as an advisor and liaison to the Avengers in this movie. As for Namor, I think the Russos will give him a prominent role. They love this kind of complex and morally grey character. He would probably serve as a counterbalance in the decisions made by the heroes. And I hope there will be some real tensions, especially related to Doom's plan. I don't know if the idea of everyone meeting in a dried up Talokan is his suggestion, but it could make sense. International waters don't belong to any nation. This allows the crisis to be managed without any interference. Finally, the last universe, the X-Men 1005. It entered the MCU for the first time in the post-credits scene of the Marvels. While Darwin uses the quantum bracelets to open a portal, she creates an incursion. Monica Rambeau then goes through this portal to close it. She is then found by the X-Men and meets Beast and Binary. That's the superhero identity of her mother's variant, Maria Rambeau, in this universe. This needs to be mentioned since few are discussing it. These X-Men are clearly the ones from the trailer. And finally, everything seems to indicate that they are indeed the Fox X-Men, the ones we knew. Well, almost. These aren't the ones from the first trilogy, but rather those from the new timeline at the end of Days of Future Past. So, they're X-Men whose story we know almost nothing about since Wolverine reset them. But Charles Xavier and Magneto appear to know the time travel history. Well, it's something I didn't really believe, for the simple reason that if Deadpool and Wolverine also come from this universe, it creates a lot of timeline issues. Like the fact that in Deadpool 2 we see the young X-Men. Or that it would mean 2 Wolverines coexist in the same universe. Or that it's the same continuity as the movie Logan, which takes place at the same time as Doomsday 2029. It's a mess. It's the X-Men. We're used to it. Let's just say we don't care. It's the sequel to Days of Future Past. You get the picture. Now we can start asking questions and try to answer them. Doom's manipulation. We've been talking about this movie regularly for several months now, about how it could unfold, but especially about how Doom will actually interact with everyone. I've often said on this channel that he'll manipulate everyone. Me, you, the Avengers. But this trailer is making me doubt, and that's not all. During a recent Q&A, the most well-informed insider in the game, Alex Perez, answered a question I had been wondering about lately. How much of the movie has been guessed? And his answer is really interesting. Most people have guessed right for the first 2 acts. So far. No one seems to agree on the 3rd act, and I hope it doesn't leak, because the end of Act 2 makes you think the movie is over. And that's when a huge plot twist happens that will leave you speechless, and then you realize there's still an hour of the movie left. That's information that changes a lot of things. Since it means that Doomsday is going to happen much faster than we think, let's take a step back. Let's say the first part is the manipulation part. The second would then be the part where everyone's against Doom. Since Kevin Feige had confirmed that the movie was a team-up of the X-Men, the Avengers, the Wakandans, the Fantastic Four, and Loki, all against Doom. So what about the third part? Well, probably the consequences of losing to him. The head of Marvel, during an interview for Fandango at CinemaCon, also specified that Doomsday and Secret War wouldn't be connected in the same way as Infinity War and Endgame.
People familiar with the comic stories see that they will relate. But I will say this, they relate in a very different way than Infinity War and Endgame. I think people are expecting a similar connection, and it's in a very different way.
In other words, they absolutely want to avoid the comparison, avoid repeating the last Avengers formula of having them lose brutally at the end of the movie. Ending with that and starting a new movie about the consequences means they'll likely introduce it right in the film. The third act of Doomsday would probably be the creation of Battleworld and the introduction to this new world, showing where each of those heroes fits into it. He also said in this interview that obviously one leads to the other, but that Secret Wars was the most ambitious film ever created by the studio.
Secret Wars is the most ambitious project we've ever done.
Secret Wars, not Doomsday. So Doomsday is really the prequel to Secret Wars, and its third part will set everything up so that only the big spectacle remains for the final chapter of the multiverse saga. But let's get back to Doomsday. If the first part of the movie focuses on manipulation, there's a good chance that this manipulation won't be on a large scale. At the very least, it might not play as big a role as I thought, but instead be more isolated. Let's try to analyze all of this. We now know this in a pretty straightforward way. The beginning of the movie will take place in Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man universe. We'll see the very first incursion between Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man universe and the X-Men universe. The X-Men, who apparently have been fighting for their survival against many incursions for a long time. The scene should show us Wolverine fighting against Tobey. But then, which Wolverine? The one from the end of Days of Future Past or the one from Deadpool? Honestly, I have no idea how they're going to get out of this. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Because in this scene, we would see that it's Beast who activates a bomb capable of destroying this universe and saving his own. This bomb concept comes directly from Jonathan Hickman's run, right from the very beginning. While Black Panther discovers the very first incursion and Black Swan emerging from it, he witnesses for the first time the destruction of a universe by her. And it seems that the X-Men, or this universe's cabal or Illuminati, whatever you want to call them, have made this practice a habit. And it could be that this technology is possibly borrowed from the TVA, confusing worlds, sending them into the void. But then, did they do it alone? There's a detail from the very beginning of filming that's been on my mind. The very start of filming was marked by a photo of Dr. Doom's director's chair inside the X-Men's mansion. So it's quite possible that the first day was immediately a huge fight scene, but I find that hard to believe. I think it's more likely a dialogue scene so that everyone can really get into their character. I think this shows that Doom actually knows his X-Men well. In fact, he used them for a long time to get rid of a good number of universes. That would explain the involvement of this bomb. Because it's possible that Doom somehow got hold of Kang's technology, especially the portals and the jammers. Anyway, until the day when it all came to a head between them. That's when he sought out the Fantastic Four. Things get interesting there. The movie will show a crisis involving 3 universes. Not thousands like in the comics, just 3. The last 3 in the multiverse. Like I said, the X-Men universe, which is 1005, the Fantastic Four's universe, 828, and the Avengers universe, 616. After manipulating the X-Men, Doom then manipulates the Fantastic Four. To convince them, he simply explains the X-Men are the main cause of the multiverse's destruction. Yes, they destroyed countless lives and universes, so they have to be stopped. That's where his line from the trailer comes in. At the end of the day, we will be faced with an unimaginable choice. He's preparing the Fantastic Four to make a choice. The choice to destroy the X-Men's universe. In reality, Doom's strength will lie in his power of persuasion, the ability to turn heroes into pragmatic and cold beings to ensure the survival of their universe. There, he would refine his plan with Reed. When would an incursion happen? I've always wondered how the Fantastic Four traveled between universes. We've had many theories. But above all, How, just by chance, would they be able to choose the universe of the X-Men or that of the Avengers? Well, I think they'll simply do it through an incursion. That avoids any belligerent explanation. We would then have the journey from Universe 828 to 1005 and the beginning of the battle between Doom and the X-Men. Now, I know I'm repeating myself, but it's so that it's clear for everyone. But then, in all this, how does Thor fit in? Where do the Avengers come in here? Well, I think it's in the same way as the Fantastic Four, through an incursion. Let's get back to the trailer. So the beginning shows Xavier in his mansion looking at a red sky. I think this moment is showing us an incursion, maybe even two. First, the Fantastic Four attack the mansion wielding Doom's power. Apparently, Doom has used runes to control the Sentinels. On the other side, an incursion is happening at the same time involving Earth 616. The mutant Earth is the epicenter of all this. Obviously, by destroying other worlds over and over, theirs has become extremely unstable. I say an incursion is happening on Earth 616 because, during the Avengers Towers discussion, the sky is red. This explains the well-known space crisis that sidelined the new Avengers. The former Avengers handled it themselves. Once again, we're connecting the dots. I told you in a previous video, Thor will probably join the Avengers after his adopted daughter Love is in decline. And it's possible that she may have had visions of, let me remind you, she is still the flesh and blood reincarnation of the entity Eternity. In other words, of the multiverse. Thor, to save her, will then go to Earth, or directly cross the incursion himself. On their side, the Avengers made up of Sam, Falcon, Shang-Chi and Ant-Man are warned of the situation by Captain Marvel. She, who has already experienced an incursion and detects traces of Monica Rambeau in this event, and it's the perfect opportunity for her to go save her. Together, they board Carol's ship and also cross through this incursion. Now, what makes me think that Doom won't follow them and manipulate everyone is that Thor is vindictive. He fought Doom, identified him as a real threat, and in his speech, he's definitely talking about him. So the only way to understand how all this fits together is definitely through a three-way setup. And here, we go back to the photos from the start of filming Unbox PhD. Remember the ones outside the mansion? We saw debris from Sentinels there, remnants of the fight against Doom, but also a replica of a ship. And not the one from the Fantastic Four, more like Captain Marvel's, so I think their ship is going to crash. And that everything will spiral out of control from there, giving us a huge battle between three factions that don't know each other at all. Specifically, the ones we already know, Shang-Chi versus Gambit, Reed versus Diablo, or as we saw there, Thor versus Doom. Now, I'm leaving out the fight with Yelena, because I think that will come a bit later. And that's where the biggest question comes in. How, in the end, will the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, and the Avengers decide that they need to work together? Well, I think everything will hinge on Doom's betrayal. Yes, right at the start of the movie. Reports tell us that no, Doom's face will never be revealed to the Avengers. Not in this movie, though we might have seen him in the Fantastic Four universe in the post-credit scene when he removes his mask. Still, they won't connect him to Tony Stark. Anyway, Doom would be extremely violent in this attack on the X-Men, who would retreat to Magneto's place, who, let me remind you, owns a huge mansion in this universe. It's the filming location for the royal family. Then, Doom would somehow betray the Fantastic Four. That leaves the Fantastic Four and the Avengers, and Reed would admit that he was fooled by Doom. Only their ship remains. But how can they be trusted? Well, this is where Steve Rogers comes in. His presence on the ship, his beard, his clothes show us that he's no longer the young, isolated dad from the teaser. No, Steve has decided to get involved, possibly also manipulated by Doom, and he knows the Fantastic Four. By the way, let's go back to the fact that he takes Mjolnir from Thor. Contrary to what I told you personally, I don't think Doom destroys Stormbreaker. If Steve Rogers hasn't revealed himself until this very moment, maybe it's because he doesn't have a weapon or a shield. So I think Mjolnir will be his main weapon in the movie, leaving Stormbreaker to him, especially since the Thor teaser we saw really seems to take place after this confrontation with Doom. He knows his enemy and fears him, but still has Stormbreaker, so he probably has both weapons with him, just like in Endgame. But let's get back to Steve. With his presence on the ship, we obviously think of that report I hated saying that Loki moved him into the Fantastic Four universe. But if we connect the dots, it might actually be true after all, because I can't see any other explanation for his presence on the ship. Anyway, Steve explains the situation, and then everyone returns to Earth 616 in the Fantastic Four ship to find a solution, again through the incursion. That's where they meet the Thunderbolts in the new Avengers Tower, and this is where the second act of the movie begins. In short, Doom manipulates the X-Men to destroy as many universes as possible, likely causing most incursions, then pushes the Fantastic Four to attack the X-Men. Probably to get something he needs. The Avengers join the party through an incursion and everyone ends up betrayed by Doom. Thor faces him and realizes how powerful the guy is. And Steve Rogers is the link that unites the Avengers and the Fantastic Four. This leads them all to return to Earth 616 to find help. Yes, now they need to come up with a plan to stop Doom. Assembly. For now, it's still really hard to understand how Doom is going to do it. Surely his goal is to reach Loki, but that's not all. The clips showed that his armor contained many artifacts, notably those that appear to be Mjolnir, as well as Captain Marvel's star on the medallions. A few weeks ago, Alex Perez informed us that the use of runes, as we saw in WandaVision, would be one of the keys to Doom's powers. That's probably how he's going to control the Sentinels. But these artifacts could also be part of his arsenal of power. So the question is whether he will draw this power directly from the characters of 616, or if he will already possess it, having taken it from variants in the multiverse. These two artifacts aren't the only ones. Out of respect for my source, I can't show the photo, but I did see an interesting image of Doom's mask. And the inside is filled with engravings, runes and symbols. One of them is the very recognizable symbol of Kamataj, implying that Doom already possesses the power of the sorcerers, and possibly that of Strange as well. But let's continue. Recall the detailed light show projected months ago at the Disney Expo in Shanghai. It was impressively vivid back then. We see Doom execute his iconic move of ripping out Thanos' spine, but more importantly, he approaches a massive door reminiscent of the Library of Worlds. A key location in Jonathan Hickman's run, the Black Swan's headquarters is where Doom, as Rabumalal, centralizes his operations and travels between universes. Later on, we see Doom handling a ring that looks a lot like Chunky's in the post-credits scene. It's a ring in which he makes a rune appear. The same one we find in the movie, on his throne. When it explodes, we see shards of glass, a bit like the representation of the multiverse seen by the Watcher in What If. Possibly, if we connect the dots, this Library of Worlds could be located where the Watcher stands. Based on experience, we learned Wanda's crown could appear in various shapes and colors, and the movie's concept art helix might conceal a secret. So I have to admit, after that, I went through everything. Well, they might be talking about the young Avengers in relation to their colors, but we're going to focus on another detail. The one from the concept art of God Emperor Doom. In this one, we see that the top of his mask is a bit different. It could remind you of Wanda's crown. And so we can imagine that here too, he would have absorbed her power. In short, Doom is probably seeking power. In the comics, he uses the powers of Molecule Man to steal the powers of the Beyonders and channel them. Here, there are no Beyonders or Molecule Man, but there are many beings with immense powers. And it may be that Doom's goal is this, to collect all the powers he needs. Wanda for reality manipulation and creation, Loki for time manipulation, Sentry for energy and power, Strange for the mind by reusing his manipulation spell. Franklin for his soul manipulation. He did manage to resurrect his mother after all, and Doom will definitely need that skill to repopulate his world. And finally, why not Love, who represents space? You get it? Her own infinity gauntlet at maximum power. Well, this part is purely theoretical. Let's stay focused and return to my idea. The Avengers are central, with the Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four joining them. And they absolutely have to find a way to team up to stop Doom. So they gather with Wakanda and Namor in Talokan to come up with a plan. Only, no one seems to agree on how to go about it, and I think this is where Thor will give his speech. A powerful speech that will establish him as the true leader of this movie. Together, they will realize that they need the X-Men and their experience with the multiverse. They too have been manipulated by Doom, and it's not just about destroying. Teams will then be formed. One would go to the X-Men, and according to the trailer, it will include at least Sam, Reed, Yelena, and probably Shuri and Captain Marvel. Since there's a good chance the Avengers will try to convince the X-Men to help them. And of course, the X-Men won't trust them right away. I think the trailer scenes with Yelena and Mystique will happen then, along with the shot where Reed stops Sam from intervening. And that's where the relationship between Carol Danvers and Monica Rambeau will become important. Alex Perez actually confirmed it. That relationship is the key element linking the Avengers and the X-Men. And at the same time, it makes sense. We could have guessed it. I put Shuri here because I'm considering the three brains from the three universes. So, with Beast and Reed, they're going to join forces to try to find a solution to stop these incursions between their three universes. On their side, Thor and Steve are going to put together a team to prevent Doom from reaching Loki. Yes, once again, I hate this rumor. But apparently Loki left Captain away to contact him. A card, so together, they would go to the TVA. And for once, we know that's going to happen, since Chris Hemsworth's stunt double. A photo on a set with a TVA floor plaque, and a rumor says that Doom is going to wreak havoc there. But this whole team will probably fail. On their side, rumors say that the geniuses are going to develop a cannon system, allowing them to push back each planet. So, 3 teams will be formed, one on each world, to set up these cannons. However, on the Fantastic Four's world, Dr. Doom has done his work from his base in the Adveri, and it's here that we'll really discover the full extent of his plan, his followers and his army. We know that Doom will be followed by 3 characters. Personally, I see it as an interpretation of the Norns. From Norse or Greek mythology, in the legends, they are the ones who have power over the fate of every individual, and they are the ones who trigger Ragnarok, the end of everything, and the beginning of a new cycle. An image that, in this case, fits perfectly with Doom's plan. According to Alex Perez, these 3 Norns would have golden masks, and robes of different colors, green, purple, and red. He also tells us that these characters would have been used to hide important characters, without having the actors on set. So we can imagine they're also hiding important actors. For example, Elizabeth Olsen, as Wanda under the red robe. Why not Doctor Strange or Clea under the purple robe, and Sylvie or Death under the green robe? This moment at the Adveri would be the climax of the film, a battle like the MCU has never done before, possibly across all 3 universes. Like the very last pages of the Hickman run, through total chaos, a lot of heroes are going to die, and the battle would end with Doom's victory, and the end of the multiverse, which brings us to this answer from Alex Perez. Everyone would think it's the end of the movie, but there's still an hour left. Imagine the craziness, the rise of Battleworld. So, the 3rd act would begin, just like the Secret Wars run starts. We would then discover Battleworld, in a Game of Thrones style, which is actually one of Hickman's acknowledged inspirations. Yes, he also has a wall with monsters on the other side, starting with the Thor Corps and their hammer ritual, where each recruit must prove they are worthy of Mjolnir, the desolate wasteland, Hulk village, the Deadlands full of zombies, and also the mutant territories. A whole world opens up to us, and at its center, Yggdrasil. And the throne of the God Emperor surrounded by his court, Sue and Franklin at his side, and Doctor Strange as his sheriff, his only advisor, who remembers the world before. Every person who perished in previous events finds their place again here, so we could see old villains return, like Thanos, Zemo, Khonshu, or even Ultron as barons. Bounty hunters like Yelena, or simple villagers. An hour of pure discovery, for us to make this new world our own, until the big discovery, that of a raft. And inside, the heroes who were missing, those who survived the world before. Strange is called to the scene and manages to open it. That's when the quest to overthrow Doom begins. And the film ends on that note, not with a confusing climax, but one full of promise. Alex Perez announced it would differ from the comics. They won't be seasoned heroes like Reed, Black Panther, or Carol Danvers who come out of it, but rather heroes who are much, much younger. And of course, we think of the young Avengers, but also, why not, Steve Rogers' son? Yes, young actor Weasley Holloway has joined the Avengers Doomsday cast and is likely playing James Roger. A lesser-used comic character becomes important in Next Avengers, where he and his companions fight their parents whose minds have been manipulated to switch sides.
Avengers, assemble!
Anyway, we're in for a lot of surprises, my friends, but this movie already looks so epic, so let me know in the comments if you had already seen all that coming based on the trailer descriptions. And if this trailer hypes you up and you want to see it, if you're discovering me with this video, I analyze and break down the entire MCU universe every week, so if you enjoyed it, subscribe, it's free. In the meantime, don't forget to stay curious. That's the secret to being happy. See you